The under-falconer found her at the third bell of morning, and the under-falconer was a man who did not weep in front of other men. So when Halder Vance crossed the mews-yard and saw young Pell sitting on the cobbles outside the hawk-house, with his back against the door and his face wet, he knew before he had to be told. "Where?" Halder said. "On her perch, master. Stiff. The hood still on." Halder Vance had been the king's master falconer for 26 years. He had served 3 princes, 4 chamberlains, and 1 undeclared war, and in all that time he had kept one rule above the long catalogue of rules in the falconry charter: the bird is yours, and the answer is yours. He did not run now. He walked the 18 paces from the yard to the door of the hawk-house at the same pace he walked every morning, because the boys were watching and the boys would remember. Inside the long stone room the air was cold and smelled of dust and the clean iron tang of the perches. The hawks shifted on their blocks, all of them, all 6, hooded and quiet. Only the 7th perch, the perch at the end, in the cleanest light bore a shape that did not shift. The prize bird of the royal hunt, Phelan. A great gyr-falcon, snow-white at her breast and slate down her back, 11 years on the king's glove, the bird every visiting court came to see. She was dead. The hood was still buttoned. Her talons clenched the perch the way a sleeping bird's do not clench it. The leather of her jesses lay slack. Halder reached out and did not touch her yet. He looked. He looked at the perch, at the stone beneath, at the water cup, at the line of feathers along the floor where she had taken a step or two in distress before she had gone back to the perch and died. He looked at the hood. The hood was hers calf, with the rosette and palace red, and it was set as he had set it last night at watering. "Who has been in here since the dusk bell?" he said. And Pell, behind him, said in the small voice of a 16-year-old who has never been close to a thing like this, "Master, only Breck." The chamberlain would be at the gate before noon. The chamberlain was a careful man who liked his charges to come to him already named, already arrested, already explained. Halder had until the lifting of the noon banner to give him a name, and Halder knew with the certainty of 26 years that the name the yard wanted to give him was the wrong one. Breck was 13. A stable boy lent up from the south yard last winter, because he had a hand with the smaller birds and a quietness in him the hawks liked. He had been the only one in the mews after the dusk bell, because Halder had sent him in to set the water for the night and lock the inner door. He was the boy who would be blamed by the easy reading of the morning, and he was the boy Halder Vance was not going to send to the chamberlain. "Where is he?" Halder said. "In the tack room. He's been there since I called him at the bell. He's not slept. He says he didn't go near her perch, master. He swears it on his mother." "Send him to me," Halder said, "but not yet. First the bird." He took her down. He cradled her in both palms. She weighed less than a loaf, and he turned her, and he saw at once what he had half seen from across the room. There was a small wet stain at the base of her crop. Not blood. Something pale and faintly green at the edge, where it had run a finger length down her breast feathers. He bent and smelled it, and it smelled of clean meat and something else under the meat, a faint bitter note he knew the way a man knows the smell of his own kitchen. Then he saw the second thing. A single short feather-barred russet and brown caught in the wax on the perch top, not from her. Phelan had no russet on her. He set her down on the binding cloth he carried for these tasks, and he covered her face. He stood a long moment with his hand on her covered head, and did not speak. 26 years. He had whistled her to the glove when she was a chick the size of a fist. He had named her after a river his mother had walked beside. He had let no other man fly her, not even the king, unless the king insisted, and the king had insisted only twice. He let the moment have its weight, and then he set the moment down and went to work. The yard outside had gathered. The boys, the 2 under-falconers, the carter who came at this hour, the old goshawk man Tyrion with his bad leg. All of them stood in the strange silence that gathers around bad news that has not yet been said. "She is gone," Halder said. He did not raise his voice. "I will tell the chamberlain at noon. Until I tell him, no man speaks of how. No man names a name. The yard is closed." He looked at Pell. "Bring Breck." Breck came across the cobbles like a boy who has been running away from a beating for hours inside his own head. He was small for 13. His hands were stained with the dye of the new jess leather they had been cutting yesterday. He stopped 4 paces from Halder and stood at attention the way Halder had taught him. "Breck." "Master." His voice broke and did not recover. "Look at me." The boy looked. "You watered her last night." "Yes, master." "You hooded her." "You hooded her, master. I only set the water and locked the door." "Did you handle her at all?" "No, master. You said never without you." "Did you feed her?" "No, master. She was fed already. I saw the crop. She'd had her measure." Who set her food last night? Master Tyrion, master, at the 4th bell of evening. He always does the evening feed when you go to the kennels. Halder nodded once. He had asked the questions in the order he asked them every time, and the boy had answered each in the order a guilty boy could not have answered. Halder Vance had heard a great many lies from boys in 26 years. He knew the shape of the truth in this one. "Show me your hands." The boy held them up, stained black and tan along the knuckles from the dye. No grease, no feather oil, no telltale smear of crop meat under the nails. "Now your sleeves." The boy turned the cuffs out. Clean. Halder put his hand for one moment on the boy's shoulder, and Breck did the thing a boy does when an old man he trusts touches him after a long fear. He did not cry, but his whole small body let down by half an inch. "You will not be named," Halder said quietly. "Go to the tack room. Stay there. Speak to no one. If the Chamberlain's man asks for you, you say nothing, and you send him to me." "Master!" Breck went. Halder turned and walked the 18 paces back into the hawk house, and he stood again over the perch where Phelan had died, and he made himself think the way the Chamberlain would think. A bird does not die in her hood with her crop full unless something in her crop killed her. The pale, wet stain was crop leak. She had brought it up in the night and not been able to clear it through the hood. The faint bitter under the meat was the thing, something in her feed. He went to the food room. The food room was a narrow stone shed at the back of the mews, with a cold slab and a row of small lidded jars. He found the jar Tyrion had used last evening. He knew it by the chalk mark, and he found a second mark beside Tyrion's chalk, in a different hand, a hand he did not at first recognize. He uncovered the jar. He bent and smelled. The same faint, bitter, sharper here. He dipped a finger and touched the tip of his tongue to it, the way a falconer learns to do, and he knew at once. Heart of Vale. A small green herb the houndmen used in tiny measures to ease an old dog through a long evening. In a hound it slowed the breath gently. In a hawk it stopped her. He sat down on the cold slab and put his hands flat to the stone and let his head go forward and did not move for a half count of 10. Then he stood, and he looked at the second chalk mark, and he placed the hand. It was the hand of Lord Estrin Mowbray, the first master of the king's royal hunt. A man who came down to the mews himself, on the eve of every great flying, because he liked, he said, to smell the morning before it was a morning. A vain man, and a careless man, and a man who had once told Halder Vance at a banquet that the houndmen and the falconers were, in the end, the same trade. Halder had bowed and said nothing. Mowbray kept a great old wolfhound called Gristle. Gristle was failing. Mowbray had been seen at the kennels 3 nights, running with a small green paper twist in his pocket from the houndmen's apothecary. Halder closed his eyes. He saw it. Mowbray, in the food room before the dusk bell, putting his twist down for a moment on the slab to fuss with a buckle on his coat, then catching up the wrong twist, the meat-stuffing twist Tyrion had laid out for Phelan's evening, and dropping his houndman's powder into it, without ever knowing he had crossed the two. Mowbray, kindly to Gristle, dropping a measure into the dog's bowl in the kennel at the same hour, and writing on the falconer's slate in his fine looping hand, because he had been here, because he liked them to see he had been here. An accident. A vain, careless accident by a man who would never in his life walk into a chamberlain's office and say, "I think I killed the king's hawk." The chamberlain would not understand a careless accident. The chamberlain understood a name. The chamberlain would take a name and put a brand on it, and Breck was the only name the morning was offering, and a brand on a 13-year-old boy from the south yard would follow that boy until the day he died. Halder Vance stood in the food room and held the two truths at once, the way a falconer holds a bird that wants to fly, and an idea about why. He was 61 years old. He had loved one bird more than he should have. He had lost her to a fool who did not know hawks. He could destroy the fool by noon, and he would be in the right, and the king would back him, and Mowbray would be off the royal hunt before evening prayer, and the boy would be safe either way. He thought about it for a long moment. Then he did the thing he had not expected to do. He carried the jar to the washstone, and he poured it out clean, and he scrubbed the stone, and he set the jar on the drying rail. He took down a fresh jar and set it ready for the evening. He went to the slate and looked at the 2 chalk marks, and he took a damp rag, and he wiped Mowbray's mark away, and he wiped his own marks too, and he wrote a single new one in his own hand, and dated it that morning. Then he went and brought Tyrion in. Tyrion was old. Tyrion's leg was bad. Tyrion would understand. "She is gone." Halder said, "It was the feed. There was heart of Vale in the meat. It came from the kennel. Somebody crossed our jar with a houndman's twist and did not know." Tyrion's old face went very still. "Who?" That does not need a name yet. Halder. That does not need a name yet. The two old men looked at each other a long moment. Tiran was the only man living who had been at the Mews longer than Halder. He had been there when Phelan had been a chick. He knew the way Halder Vance had whistled her down out of the rafters that first winter. He knew, too, the way the Chamberlain worked. "You'll have to give him a story," Tiran said. "I'll give him the bird and the feed," Halder said. "I will tell him she died of bad meat from the kennel that should never have been near my food room. I will tell him the system that let the kennels and the Mews share a back corridor is the thing that needs fixing, not a man. I will tell him I am the Master Falconer, and that her end is on my watch and on my account, and that I have written it in the book. And the boy did nothing. The boy will be named for what he did do. He set her water, he locked the inner door, he reported it at the third bell. That is all I will say of him. And Mowbray." Halder was quiet a moment. "I will speak to Lord Mowbray myself," he said. "Tonight, after the Chamberlain has gone. I will tell him what I know, and I will tell him what I did not say. He will know. He will have to live the rest of his life knowing that an old falconer kept his name out of the book. That will be his sentence and mine." Tiran looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded once. "You loved her," Tiran said. "I did. And you are letting him walk." "I am keeping a 13-year-old boy out of a chamberlain's office," Halder said. "Mowbray will walk because I want the boy to walk. That is what I am buying. Not mercy for Mowbray, mercy for Breck." Tiran nodded again, slower. "And the king?" "The king will be told the truth when the king asks for the truth. Not before, and not from the chamberlain." He looked down at his own hands. They were steady. "She was 11 years old," he said. "She had 4 good seasons left. I would have given her to the prince in the spring when the prince came of age. I had it picked already, the day, the field, the long stoop she liked at the rooks. I was not going to outlive her. I had asked her not to outlive me." He smiled, small and tired, at his old friend. "She always did obey," he said, "almost always." The noon banner went up at the gate. The Chamberlain's men came across the inner court at a measured pace, and Halder Vance went to meet them, with his book under his arm and the binding cloth in his other hand. He gave the Chamberlain a slow, exact account of bad feed from the back corridor, an old shared door that should be bricked, a fault in the food room procedure that he, as master, owned. He named no man. He named the boy only as the one who had reported and the one who had locked. The Chamberlain wrote, and looked at him, and wrote again, and did not press, because Halder Vance had been the king's master falconer for 26 years, and his book was a book the Chamberlain knew. They carried Phelan out at the second bell of afternoon. The boys lined the yard. Breck stood at the door of the tack room with his cap in both hands and his face white, and when Halder passed him with the binding cloth in his arms, Halder did not look at him, because to look at him would have given the morning away, and the morning was bought. That evening, in the long red light, Halder Vance walked the upper terrace to Lord Mowbray's apartments and asked, courteously, for a moment of his time. The yard did not hear what was said in that room. The yard heard only that Lord Estrin Mowbray took ill leave of the royal hunt the following morning, and was seen, twice in the years after, in the chapel at first light, kneeling alone, and that the king did not press him to return. In the Mews, the 7th perch stood empty a season, and then a young haggard from the cliffs was set on it, and Halder Vance whistled her down from the rafters the way he had whistled the other. Breck stayed in the Mews. He grew, and he had a hand with the great birds, and in time, long after Halder Vance was gone to the chalk hills, with a pension and an old book. Breck, by then Master Breck, taught his own boys the 18-pace walk from yard to door, and the 4 questions one asks a boy who watered a bird the night she died, and the rule that lived above all the rules in the charter. The bird is yours, and the answer is yours, and sometimes the answer is mercy. You write in no book.